Hello there. Started a bit later than I wanted to, but all things considered, I'm feeling more lively and energetic than I did last time I did this, so hopefully things will be able to work out. I'm going to wait hopefully until at least a few people show up. Hopefully that is. And I need to go and make an announcement about this as a post, because yes, it might show up in people's inboxes, but at the same time, I'm just going to go here and I'm going to there we go. Now then, okay, that's been sent out as a post. And well, hello there. I'm just going to stall. I said I would wait around 10-15 minutes to give people a little time to show up. So I'm going to just very quickly show people what we're going to be doing today. Let me just see. Yes, there it is. There we go. This is what we're going to be looking at today. I'm just going to check and see how that looks like. Okay. Let's see. I don't know what RRL is. I know you mentioned it before, but I'm not actually sure what it is, to be honest. Okay. I need to have stuff nearby to be a bit hydrated, as it were. Sorry. Now, as noted in the comments section, this is partly a reward for people who've already donated and partly an incentive to help others to be motivated towards that same altruistic goal. As I don't want to annoy people, I do want to give people something in return for what they do. It's just the current situation is a bit unideal, and I do require to find some ways to cover rent until I can start working hopefully next week. I'm just going to be very hopeful about that. Now, there's been a lot of delays, especially because of the Easter holidays. Basically, from Friday to next Monday, everything being closed for 4 days in a row. So it's a bit of an awkward situation as to getting a concrete answer about dates or specific feedback about the interviews I've just had. Specifically, I've had one about a position basically involving a lot of travel to basically inform people about cancelled services from the local railway company. I already mentioned that before. And so anyway, while there's also a secondary offer from something a bit closer, which I would like to possibly take if I can reach out to them. On Tuesday, I've actually reached out and responded to the response I got from the temp agency on Friday. But of course, being the holidays, I've not heard anything back. But they did say they wanted to meet up in person because they apparently were really interested in filling a spot. Anyway, so yeah, I'm just going to ramble on a bit and wait for, let's say, if we wait another 10 minutes at most, and then we can start. So I hope it doesn't annoy anyone, and I sort of ramble on a bit. I'm just giving people a little time to show up. I'd rather finish that off because I have a tendency to say, oh, I'm not going to be greedy. I'm not going to drink all of it at once, then leave a tiny bit left in the can, put it down, and then knock it over and spill it by accident. So I've decided to just finish it off and not waste it, because I waste a lot of things unintentionally by trying to save them like this. So yeah, we have few more minutes left to go. Now, I would have started this a bit earlier, but today I've actually managed to wake myself up at 3 p.m. because I couldn't get to sleep until 9 in the morning. Well, basically, I actually had a bit of a tooth and jaw ache yesterday. Basically, this whole side of my mouth, and it didn't subside for about 2 hours. I had to both take some tramadol as well as just do the whole trick where you take a Panadol tablet and melt it a bit and then put it next to the thing that's in your mouth where it's hurting and let it dissolve into there directly. That took a bit, but seems to have actually worked in the long run. It was either that or the tramadol actually kicked in. I don't know exactly which. Either way, mind you, but I should have probably taken 2 of those. But I've always had this problem where, because I'm as tall as I am, regular doses of medication don't actually work for me, so I always have to double them to get any kind of effect. That happened when I went to the emergency dental surgery a few years back. I had to basically get 2 shots into my gums in order to numb anything, because the first shot did literally nothing. So, yeah, that's fun, isn't it? Anyways, to stop talking, so I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes. I'm going to, let's see, if I am going to do this, I'm just basically testing out the setup and how it works in relation to, how CPU intensive it is to share screen versus not share one. It would slightly annoy me if I couldn't share the screen, but at the same time, it's not a major issue. But figuring out the technicalities, it does genuinely seem like it's more CPU intensive to share a screen, even if that screen is a static image. So I might go back and forth between those while reading them. Anyone who's shown up now, hello. We're preparing to just start reading in a few minutes. So it might, I would say, about 6 minutes from now, and then we can start reading. So I'm just giving people a bit more time to notice my links that I sent out and potentially join in. I have shared them on a few places. I'm sorry for being a bit boring at the outset. I am, I don't want to actually start talking anything specific about this, about the topic before I actually get to it, because then I want people to miss out. So I believe that before we dig into specifics of this, I know it's kind of annoying to just rely on just a Wikipedia summary of the person in question, but I've written out my own personal observations on Flecker a few years ago, many years ago actually, and I would have to go and find those old notes, and I'd rather just give someone a quick summary, because that's not the most important bit, but it is. But it's good to actually give some kind of an idea. And yes, there are ambulances outside, not as many as the last place I was, but there are ambulances. So we're going to deal with that as we go along. So about 5 minutes left. What I'm going to be drinking today, one of these. You probably can't read it, and it's called a Kokta. It's kind of a weird herbal Coke thing. I didn't really like it the first time I had it, but I've been buying it ever since because it's different. So that's kind of why I keep drinking it. I mean, I sort of like it now, so I guess that worked. And I do like the blue and yellow design it has. So I'm just going to, about 4 minutes now, and when we can start. Well, I've tried ginger ale and never liked it. I've only ever liked ginger ale one single time, and that was actually the one made by Red Bull. Except that was the non-spicy version. Like, the non-spicy version made by Red Bull is the only ginger ale I've ever actually liked drinking. because every other one was either too spicy or too sweet. And I realize it's because it's usually used as a mixer, but you know, I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry. F in the chat there a bit, and I'm just gonna. Okay, I have to just. I'll put this in the comments so people actually are able to see it if they show up after I've mentioned it. But yes, in 3 minutes, we're going to start this. So if there's time after we finish reading this, I might go and redo some more stories from the book we were reading last time, specifically The Mistaken Fury and Other Lapses by Caldry. It's more of a neat little aesthetic fantasy book rather than anything horrific, but I enjoy it, and I enjoy going on about it. I'm sorry. And if you sometimes see hear the fan spin up, that I'm trying, but can't really do much about that, unfortunately. I can move it around a bit, but I don't want to just accidentally cause the stream to crash. Sometimes the fan does that. I am sorry if I'm going to. Yes, now then, let us start in 2 minutes. But I'm going to open this just to avoid any spills. Thankfully, this is not so bad. But anytime I get Dr. Pepper, the bottles usually fizz up like crazy when I do obtain it. I mean. I don't need to apologize, do I? Have you met me? Do you not know I apologize all the time, anyway, forever? So it's kind of a tough shot. Yes, there we go. Oh, okay. I just noticed your message. Sorry, I don't actually know. I've never actually seen your RRL project, so I hope you do show me after the stream. I'm not actually familiar with it. Oh, and one thing I was going to show people, let me see. Before we start, I am looking for an image. This is more of an auction website, but it's the best version of this I was able to find. Okay, it doesn't show up on here, so I'm going to have to post it to the side. Oh, come on, I don't want to. Freaking hell. Sorry. I just wanted to showcase a thing. Okay, let me just go and open. Sorry, I'm trying to open up a thing, but it insisted on. I want to open it in Chrome. Bloody, for Pete's sake, come on. Sorry, no, and I need them for applications. Come right. Oh, you conveniently don't put Chrome on here on the list. Oh, that's really, really convenient that you happen to not notice. Hold on. There we go. I'm trying to. I don't want to download it. I want to display it. Why do you think me putting in the bloody friggin' no. Okay. There we go. So there we go. Okay. I didn't understand. I didn't know what that was. Thank you very much. So I believe we can start now. But firstly, I would like to show people something. So if you've actually met me on Discord, you might have seen my profile picture and don't know what it is. So I decided to show you just because. Yeah, this is actually a painting, and as you can see, that's actually the image that you might have seen in full. So let it sit there for a second. It is from an auction website. That text in the middle is because this is from an auction website. Sadly, I wasn't able to find the unaltered version. So, but yes, that's what that is. Now, anyone has seen this image, we can proceed to talk about, first of all, give a brief introduction to Flecker, or James Elroy Flecker, the author of today's book. And so let's just go and do that then. So, and yes, the author of this painting was named Adolf, but not the Adolf you're thinking of. It was I'm just going to. It's a very good picture. Photo. I just hope I can find a version of it that isn't completely screwed up now. Oh well. That's a good one. Although I really hope I'm able to show this one to you. But there we go. The picture's a bit blurry, but I hope you'll be entertained anyway. So yes, this is the artist Adolf Born specifically. I want to enunciate a bit clearer in case you were curious. And I wanted to show off. I'm sorry. Oh, you're short. Why don't I just put you up on a high shelf then? Of course, the counter to that is you couldn't ever leave. I know what I said. Come at me. Either way, this is, like I said, Adolf Born. He's known for not just illustrations to children's books, but very particular type of illustrations. I'm just going to show you some of them. Of course, there we go. Now that one's unrelated. I'm sorry that I'm blathering on, but I did feel like I should probably show you a bit more of these. I suppose showing you this page is going to be a bit more, a bit easier to showcase some of these illustrations. Let me just go on. Sadly, he's passed away a couple of years ago, but drawing these paintings for several decades, as well as drawing several well-known local kit shows, at least the original art designs thereof. And as you can see, there's a lot of notable or different illustrations to his name that I can show off. So yes, this is the author of the painting. That is the it's okay. No, I get that. No. So there's that. Now that we have this established, we can then go and talk about what the act, that being Flecker and his work. So we're talking today about James Elroy Flecker, specifically going to read his book, The Last Generation, A Story of the Future. And the reason we can read this book in one sitting is because it's around 40 pages. And not that much text on it to begin with. So yes, as you can see, he was a poet, and he actually died very young. He was not even 31 at the time of his death. And we can see, of course, I can rattle on this bit from his biography, but you can probably see it. You can see it on the screen, and if you can't, well, basically he was born in 1884. Was influenced by the so-called Parnassian poets from France. And as you can see, these photos, as you can see, he's probably most known from his play that he wrote, Hassan, as well as the poem The Golden Journey to Samarkand. And there we see a scene from the 1923 production of the play Hassan, written by Flecker. I don't actually read plays, so I don't really know I don't really know how to should I put this, how to evaluate them. But yes, that's what we're going on about, and I know I'm going a bit slow. There we go. As you can see, The Last Generation was the first novel he published. It was one of the first works he ever released, and it was one of only 2 bits of prose that he created. So, I'm sorry, I'm just going to check. I just got a message. Nothing. I just got reminded of a post I made 11 years ago, because that's really really important. Now then, now that we've rambled on a bit, it's time we actually go and check the particular book in question, and that is, I'm just going to close these extra windows, and we'll just refresh this one here and just make sure, okay, then we are. This is The Last Generation by Flecker. Now I'm going to probably turn the screen sharing on and off a bit because it's slightly CPU intensive, but we'll see where we get. Now, we can see, we're going to go, and yes, there is a dedication in Spanish that I'm not going to even try to read because I don't know Spanish. And of course, it will be really annoying if the thing bugs out now. I have the text downloaded elsewhere, I believe, so I wouldn't have to rely on it, but I don't. Of course, you start bugging out now, as it were. That always happens, doesn't it? Hold on a bit, please. There we go. Then we can start, if everyone's ready. Sorry if I mumble a bit, but I'll do my best. Now then. I had been awake for I know not how many hours that summer dawn, while the sun came over the hills and coloured the beautiful roses in my mother's garden. As I lay drowsily gazing through the window, I thought I'd never known a morning so sultry yet so pleasant. Outside not a leaf stirred, yet the air was fresh, and the madrigal notes of the birds came to me with peculiar intensity and clearness. I listened intently to the curious sound of trilling, which drew nearer and nearer, until it seemed to merge into a whirring noise that filled the room and crowded at my ears. At first I could see nothing, and lay in deadly fear of the unknown. But soon I thought I saw rims and sparks of spectral fire floating through the pane. Then I heard someone say, "I am the wind." But the voice was so like that of an old friend whom one sees again after many years that my terror departed, and I asked simply why the wind had come. "I have come to you," he replied, "because you are the first man I have discovered who is after my own heart. You whom others call dreamy and capricious, volatile and headstrong, you whom some accuse of weakness, others of unscrupulous abuse of power, you I know to be a true son of Aeolus, a fit inhabitant for those caves of boisterous song. Are you the north wind or the east wind, said I, or do you blow from the Atlantic? Yet if those be your feathers that shine upon the pane like yellow and purple threads, and if it be through your influence that the garden is so hot today, I should say you are the lazy south wind blowing from the countries that I love. I blow from no quarter of the earth, replied the voice. I am not in the compass. I am a little unknown wind, and I cross not space but time. If you will come with me, I will take you not over countries but over centuries, and directly but waywardly, and you may travel where you will. You shall see Napoleon, Caesar, Pericles, if you command. You may be anywhere in the world at any period. I will show you some of my friends, the poets. And may I drink red wine with Praxiteles, or with Catullus beside his lake? Certainly, if you know enough Latin and Greek and can pronounce them intelligently. Yes, I'm aware that stuttering on that particular line was kind of ironic. And may I live with Thais or Rhodope or some wild Assyrian queen? Unless they are otherwise employed, certainly. Ah, wind of time, I continued with a sigh, we men of this age are rotten with book lore and with a yearning for the past. And wherever I asked to go among those ancient days, I should soon get dissatisfied and weary your bright wings. I will be no pillar of salt, a sterile portent in a sterile desert. Carry me forward, wind of time. What is there going to be? The wind put his hand over my eyes. At Birmingham Town Hall. This is our first stopping place, said a voice from the points of flame. I opened my eyes, expecting to see one of those extravagant scenes that imaginative novelists love to depict. I was prepared to find the upper air busy with aeroplanes and the earth beneath given over to unbridled debauch. Instead, I discovered myself seated on a tall electric standard, watching a crowd assembled before what I took to be Birmingham Town Hall. I was disappointed in this so tame a sight, until it flashed across me that I had never seen an English crowd preserve such an orderly and quiet demeanour. And a more careful inspection assured me that although no man wore a uniform, every man carried a rifle. They were obviously waiting for someone to come and address them from the balcony of the town hall, which was festooned with red flags. As the curtains were pulled aside, I caught a momentary glimpse of an old person whose face I shall never forget. But apparently it was not for him that the breathless crowd was waiting. The man who finally appeared on the balcony was an individual not more than 30 years old, with a black beard and green eyes. At the sound of acclamation which greeted him, he burst out into a loud laugh. Then, with a sudden seriousness, he held up his hand and began to address his followers. I have but few words for you, my army, a few bitter words. Need I encourage men to fight who have staked their existence to gain mastery? We cannot draw back. Never will the cries of the slaughtered thousands we yearn to rescue from a more protracted, more cruel misery than war make us forget the myriads who still await the supreme mercy of our revenge. For centuries and for centuries we endured the march of that civilization which now, by the weapons of her own making, we set forth to destroy. We, men of Birmingham, dwellers in this hideous town, unvisited by sun or moon, long endured to be told that we were the van of progress, leading humanity year by year along her glorious path. And looking around them, the wise men saw the progress of civilization, and what was it? What did it mean? Less country, fewer savages, deeper miseries, more millionaires, and more museums. So today we march on London. Let us commemorate, my friends, at this last hour, a great, if all unwitting benefactor, the proto-martyr of our cause. You remember that lank follower of the newest art who lectured to us once within these very walls? He it was who first expounded to us the beauty of Birmingham, the artistic majesty of tall chimneys, the sombre glory of furnaces, the deep mystery of smoke, the sad picturesqueness of scrap heaps and of slag. Then we began to hate our lives in earnest. Then we arose and struck. Even now I shudder when I think of the lecturer's fate, and with a feeling of respect I commemorate his words today. Oh, then, you need not doubt of my victory nor of my power. Some of you will die, but you know that death is rest. You do not need to fear the sombre fireworks of a medieval hell, nor yet the dreary dissipations of a Methodist heaven. Come, friends, and march on London. They heard him in deep silence. There was a gentle stir of preparation. They faded far below me. 2. The proclamation. At a point 10 years farther along that dusky road, the wind set me down a prodigious room. I had never before seen so large and splendid a construction, so gracefully embellished, so justly proportioned. The shape was elliptical, and it seemed as if the architect had drawn his inspiration from the Colosseum at Rome. This hall, however, was much larger, and had the additional distinction of a roof which, supported by a granite column, was only rendered visible from beneath by means of great bosses of clear gold. Galleries ran around the walls, and there was even a corkscrew balustrade winding up round the central pillar. Every part of the building was crowded with people. There seemed to be no window in the place, so that I could not tell whether or not it was night. The whole assembly was illuminated by 1,000 electric discs, and the ventilation was almost perfectly planned on a system to me entirely strange. There was a raised throne at one end of the building on which sat a king decently dressed in black. I recognized the green-eyed man and learned that his name was Harris, Joshua Harris. The entire body of the hall was filled by soldiers in mud-colored tunics and waterproof boots. These were the men that had conquered the world. As soon as the populace were well assembled, the king made a sign to his herald, who blew so sudden and terrific a blast from his trumpet that the multitude stopped their chattering with a start. The herald proceeded to bawl a proclamation through his megaphone. I heard him distinctly, but should never have been able to reproduce his exact words had not the wind very kindly handed to me one of the printed copies for free distribution which it had wafted from a chair. The proclamation rang thus: I, Joshua Harris, by right of conquest and in virtue of my intelligence, King of Britain, Emperor of the two Americas, and Lord High Suzerain of the world, to the princes, presidents, and people of the world, greeting. Ye know that in days past an old man, now dead, showed me how man's dolorous and fruitless sojourn on this globe might cease by his own act and wisdom, how pain and death and the black power that made us might be frustrated of their accustomed prayer. Then I swore an oath to fulfill that old man's scheme, and I gathered my followers, who are the miserable men and the hungry men, and we have conquered all there is to conquer by our cannon and by our skill. Already last year I gave public notice in the proclamation of Vienna, in the proclamation of Cairo, in the proclamation of Pekin, and in the proclamation of Rio de Janeiro, that all bearing of children must cease, and that all women should be permanently sterilized according to the prescription of Dr. Smith. Therefore today, since there is no remote African plain, no island far away in the deep South Seas where our forces are not supreme and our agents not vigilant, I make my final proclamation to you, my army, and to you, princes, presidents, and people of this world, that from this hour forth there be no child born of any woman, or if born, that it be slain with its father and its mother. A fainting woman had there to be carried out. And to you, my terrestrial forces, I entrust the execution of my commands. Joy then be with you, my people, for the granaries are full of corn and wine that I have laid up sufficient for many years to come. Joy be with you, since you are the last and noblest generation of mankind, and since Dr. Smith, by his invention and by my wise provision, have enabled you to live not only without payment and without work, loud cheers from the galleries, but also with luxury and splendor, and with all the delights and none of the dangers of universal love. I expected the proclamation to be followed by an outburst of applause, but instead the whole multitude sat calm and motionless. Looking around, I was struck by the hideous appearance of mankind. It was especially revolting to look at the ears of the soldiers in front, who had their backs turned to me. These stuck out from their bullet-like heads and made the men look like two-handed teapots on stands. Yet here and there appeared in the gallery some woman's countenance beautified by the sorrows of our race, or some tall youth whose eyes expressed the darkest determination. The silence seemed to gather in folds. I was studying drowsily the Asiatic dresses and the nude people from Melanesia when I heard a noise which I thought was the sound of the wind, but I saw it was the king who had begun to laugh. It was a very strange noise indeed, and very strange laughter. Sorry, I'm just checking the comments. Now then, the Mutual Extermination Club. You would perhaps like to stay here some time, said the wind, and look around. You will then understand the significance of the generation more clearly, and you may observe some interesting incidents. I was standing with one or two other people outside a pseudo-Chinese erection, which I at first took to be a cricket pavilion, and then saw to be the headquarters of a rifle club. I apprehended from the placards that I was in Germany, and inquired in the language of the country, which I understand very well, what was the object of this rifle practice, and whether there was any thought of war. I'm sorry, I'm just going to try and deal with the... Okay. The man to whom I addressed myself, an adipose person with iron-rimmed spectacles and a kindly, intelligent face, seemed surprised at my question. "You must be a stranger," he said. "This is our very noble Vertilgungsverein." I understood. It was a club for mutual extermination. I then noticed that there were no ordinary targets, and that the cadets were pointing their rifles at a bearded man who stood with a covered pipe in his mouth, leaning against a tree about some 200 yards away. After the report, the bearded man held up both hands. "That is to signify that he has been completely missed," said the fat gentleman. "One hand wounded, 2 hands missed. And that is reasonable, vernünftig, because if he were dead he could not raise either." I approve the admirable logic of the rule, and suppose that the man would not now be allowed to go free. "Oh yes, according to the rules," he answered, "he certainly is allowed to go free, but I do not think his sense of honour would permit him to do so." "Is he then a very noble family?" I inquired. "Not at all. He is a scientist. We have a great many scientists in our club. They are all so disappointed at the way in which human progress has been impeded, and at the impossibility of a continuous evolution of knowledge accumulation, that they find no more attraction in life. And he is dead this time," he continued, shading his eyes to look as soon as the second report had flashed. "By the way," I asked, "I suppose you only exterminate members of the club?" The fellow smiled with a little disdain. "Oh, it would be legal for us to exterminate outsiders, but of course if you would like to join, why that's never a woman going over to the tree," I cried. "Oh yes, we have quite a number of intellectual women and upper-class ladies with advanced ideas in the club. But I do not think the lady is an intellectual. She is more probably a passion wreck. She was indeed a very handsome woman, in the prime of life, dressed with a little too much ostentation and coquetry, in a sleeveless transparent white blouse and a skirt to match. My informant turned around to a skinny young student with a hog-bristle hair, and made some vulgar jest about it being a pity to waste such a good piece of flesh. He was a superman, and imagined falsely, I believe, that an air of bluff cynicism, a Teutonic attempt at heartiness, was the true outward sign of inward superiority. The young man fired at the woman, and the woman raised the arm that was not shattered by the bullet. He fired again, and she fell on her knees, this time with a scream. "I think you had better have a shot," said the sharpshooter to my man. "I am rather bad at this." Indeed, his hand was shaking violently. My interlocutor bowed and went over to take the rifle. The skinny student took his place by my side and began talking to me as well. "He's an infallible shot, that Müller there. He's an infallible shot, that Müller there," he said, nodding at my former companion. "Didn't I tell you?" To my great relief, the passion-wrecked lady fell dead. I was getting wildly excited, rent between horror and curiosity. "You see that man in the plumed hat," said the student. Okay, now we have to wait. I'm sorry about this. I should have probably downloaded this earlier. I didn't expect such difficulties. So take a tiny break until this loads, or alternatively until I go and F5 this particular, there we go, right at the end too. So to restart the sentence, "He's coming round to say on whom the lot has fallen. He's coming this way, making a sign at me. Good day, sir," he said, taking off his hat with a deep, jerky bow. "I am afraid we must continue our conversation another time." 4. The episode of the baby. As soon as I turned away, rather horrified from the merry proceedings of the Mutual Extermination Club, I seemed to be in England or perhaps in America. At all events, I was walking along a dusty highway in the midst of an inquisitive crowd. In front of me, half a dozen members of the International Police Force, their tunics and boots gave me to understand their quality, were dragging along a woman who held a baby in her arms. A horror-struck and interested multitude surged behind, and rested only when the woman was taken into a large and disgusting edifice with iron gates. Aided by my distinguished appearance and carriage, I succeeded after some difficulty in persuading the chief gaoler to let me visit the cell where the mother was lodged, previous to undergoing an execution which would doubtless be as unpleasant as prolonged. I found a robust, apple-cheeked woman very clear and neat, despite her forlorn condition and the rough handling the guards had used to her. She confessed to me with tears that she had been in her day a provincial courtesan, and that she had been overcome by a desire to have a child, just to see what it was like. She had therefore employed all imaginable shifts to avoid being injected with smithia, and had fled with an old admirer to a lonely cave, where she had brought forth her child. And a pretty boy too, she added, wringing her hands, and only 14 months old. She was so heartbroken that I did not like to ask her any more questions till she had recovered, for fear her answer should be unintelligible. Finally, as I desired to learn matters that were of common knowledge to the rest of the world and was not anxious to arouse suspicion, I represented myself as a cultured foreigner who had just been released from a manicomio and was therefore naturally in a state of profound ignorance on on all that pertained to modern history. I felt indeed that I would never have a better chance of gathering information. than from conversation with this solitary woman. It would be her pleasure, not her duty, to instruct me. Check the chat. There we go. So I began by asking how the diminishing numbers of the military could keep a sufficient watch, and how it was that everyone submitted so meekly to the proclamation. She answered that the police recruited themselves yearly from the more active and noble-minded of the people, that custom had a lot to do with the submissive attitude of mankind, and that apart from that, there was a great resolve abroad to carry out the project of King Harris to fulfilment. She went on to inform me that smithia was tasteless, and would act even when drunk at meals, and not merely as an injection, that it acted on both sexes, and that it was otherwise innocuous. By now, most of the well springs, reservoirs, and cisterns had been contaminated by the fluid, of which large quantities had been prepared at a very cheap price. After gleaning sundry other details, I thanked her heartily and left the cell. Outside in the courtyard, I discovered a large concourse of people examining the baby, who was naturally enough an object of extreme wonder to the whole countryside. The woman called it a duck, and used other pet names that were not then in fashion, but most of the men thought that it was an ugly little brat at best. The child was seated on a cushion, and despite his mother's absence was crowing vigorously and kicking with puny force. There was some debate as to how it should be killed. Some were for boiling it and eating it. Others were for hitting it on the head with a club. However, the official who held the cushion brought the conference to a close by inadvertently dropping the child on the flags and thereby breaking its neck. I'm going to just quickly sip a bit of water. The Florentine League. I feel certain on reflection that the scene of the last episode must have been America, for I remember returning to Europe on a French boat which landed me at Havre. Sorry for the pronunciation. And immediately taking the train to Paris. As I passed through Normandy, I saw hardly a soul stirring in the villages, and the small houses were all in the most dilapidated condition. There was no more need for farms, and villagers in their lowliness were flocking to the towns. Even the outer suburbs of Paris were mere masses of flaked and decaying plaster. An unpleasant crash into the buffers of St. Lazare reminded me that the engine was being driven by an amateur. Indeed, we had met the deep train at Rouen, sent a pilot engine ahead to clear the way, and then traced it to Paris on the up line amid enthusiastic cheers. We won, but were badly shaken. We left the train beside the platforms, trusting to the Church Missionary Society man to put in away in the engine shed. These excellent philanthropists were unwearying in their efforts to prevent needless loss of life, and such work as was still done in the world was performed almost entirely by them and by members of kindred British Protestant societies. They wore a blue badge to distinguish themselves and were ordered about by everyone. At the call of Anglais, Anglais, some side-whiskered man would immediately run up to obey the summons, and you could send him to get food from the store for you, and he would be only too pleased. They would also cook hot dinners. I walked through the Boulevard Montmartre, and at every step I took, I became more profoundly miserable. One had called Paris the pleasure city, the fairest city in the world, in the days before the proclamation, for one found it vibrating with beauty and life. And now assuredly it was supremely a city of pleasure, for there was no work to be done at all. So no artist ever took any trouble now, since there was neither payment nor fame attainable, and wonderful caricatures of philanthropists scribbled on the pavement or elsewhere, or clever ribald songs shrieking out of gramophones were the only reminder of that past and beautiful Paris that I had known. There was a fatuous and brutal expression on most of the faces, and the people seemed to be too lazy to do anything except drink and fondle. Even the lunatics attracted but little attention. There was a flying machine man who determined, as he expressed it, that it should not be said of the human race that it never flew. Even the Anglais were tired of helping him with his machine, which he was quietly building on the Place de l'Opéra, a mass of intricate wires, bamboo, and paper boxes, and the inventor himself frequently got lost as he climbed cheerily among the rigging. Weary of all this, I slept alone in one of the public beds, and early next morning I clambered up the sacred slope of the butte to see the sunrise. The great silence of early morning was over the town, a deathly and unnatural stillness. As I stood leaning over the parapet, thinking miserably, a young man came up the hill slowly yet gracefully, so that it was a pleasure to look at him. His face was sad and noble, and as I had never thought to see nobility again, I hoped he would be a friend to me. However, he turned himself almost roughly and said, "Why have you come here?" "To look at the fallen city I loved long ago," I replied with careless sorrow. "Have you then also read of the old times in books?" he said, looking around at me with large bright eyes. "Yes, I have read many books," said I, trying to evade the subject. "But will you not forgive me if I ask an impertinent question?" "Nothing coming from you, sir, could be impertinent." "I wanted to ask how old you are, because you seem so young. You seem to be only 17. "You could tell me nothing more delightful," the young man replied, with a gentle yet strong and deep intonation. "I am indeed one of the youngest men alive. I am 22 years old. And I am looking for the last time on the city of Paris." "Do not say that," I cried. "All this may be horrible, but it cannot be as dull as death. Surely there must be some place in the world where we could live among beauty. Surely there must be some place in the world where we could live among beauty, some other folk beside ourselves who are still poets. Why should one die until Why should one die until life becomes hopelessly ugly and deformed?" "I am not going to kill myself, as you seem to think," said the young man. "I am going, and I pray to implore you to come with me, to a place after your heart and mine that some friends have prepared." Checking the chat again. "It is a garden, and we are a league. I have already been there 3 months, and I have put on these horrible clothes for 1 day only, in obedience to the rule of our league, that everyone should go out once a year to look at the world around. We are thinking of abolishing the rule." How pleasant and beautiful it sounds. It is, and Will you come with me there right now? Shall I be admitted? My word will admit you at once. Come this way with me. I have a motor at the bottom of the hill. During the journey, I gathered much information about the league, which was called the Florentine League. It had been formed out of the youngest years of the race, and its members had been chosen for their taste and elegance. For although few parents of the day had thought it worthwhile to teach their children anything more recondite than their letters and tables, yet some of the boys and girls had developed a great desire for knowledge, and an exceeding great delight in poetry, art, music, and all beautiful sights and sounds. We live, he said, apart from the world, like that merry company of gentlefolk who, when the plague was raging at Florence, left the city and retiring to a villa in the hills, told each other those enchanting tales. We enjoy all that life, nature, and art can give us, and love has not deserted the garden, but still draws his golden bow. It is no crippled and faded Eros of the city that dwells among us, but the golden-thighed God himself. For we do all things with refinement, and not like those outside, seeing into it that in all our acts we keep our souls and bodies both delicate and pure. We came to the door of a long wall and knocked. White-robed attendants appeared in answer to our summons, and I was stripped, bathed, and anointed by their deft hands. All the while a sound of singing and subdued laughter made me eager to be in the garden. I was then clothed in a very simple white silk garment with a gold clasp. The open door let sunshine in upon the tiles, and my friend, also clothed in silk, awaited me. We walked out into the garden, which was especially noticeable for those flowers which have always been called old-fashioned, hollyhocks, sweet williams, snapdragons, and Canterbury bells, which were laid out in regular beds. Everywhere young men and women were together. Some were walking about idly in the shade, some played at fives, some were reading to each other in the arbours. I was among a Grecian temple in which was a library and dwelling places near it. I afterwards asked a girl called Fiore di Fiamma what books the Florentines preferred to read, and she told me that they loved the poets best, not so much the serious and strenuous as those whose vague and fleeting fancies wrap the soul in enchanting sorrow. I asked, "Do you write songs, Fiore di Fiamma?" "Yes, I have written a few and music for them." "Do sing me one, and I will play the guitar." So she sang me one of the most mournful songs I had ever heard, a song which had given up all hope of fame, written for the moment's laughter or for the moment's tears. "Wind," said I that night, "stay with me many years in the garden." But it was not the wind I kissed. Sorry, I need to wipe my nose. Now then, checking the chat again. I'm going to just quickly have a sip. Okay, let's continue. Outside. I passed many years in that sad, enchanted place, dreaming at times of my mother's roses and of friends that I had known before, and watching our company grow older and fewer. There was a rule that no one should stay there after their 37th birthday, and some old comrades passed weeping from us to join the world outside. But most of them chose to take poison and to die quietly in the garden. We used to burn their bodies, singing, and set out their urns on the grass. In time I became prince of the garden. No one knew my age, and I grew no older. Yet my flame flower knew when I intended to die. Thus we lived on undisturbed, save for some horrible shout that rose from time to time from beyond the walls. But we were not afraid, as we had cannon mounted at our gates. At last, there were 12 of us left in the precinct of delight, and we decided to die all together on the eve of the Queen's birthday. So we made a great feast and held good cheer and had the poison prepared and cast lots. The first lot fell to Fiore di Fiamma, and the last lot to me, whereat all applauded. I watched my queen, who had never seemed to me as noble as then, in her mature and majestic beauty. She kissed me and drank sorry. She kissed me and drank, and the others drank, became very pale and fell to earth. Then I, rising with a last paean of exultation, raised the cup to my lips. But that moment the trees and flowers was bent beneath a furious storm, and the cup was wrenched out of my hand by a terrific blast and sent hurling to the ground. I saw the rainbow-coloured feathers flashing, and for a second I saw the face of the wind himself. I trembled, and sinking into my chair, buried my face in my hands. A wave of despair and loneliness broke over me. I felt like a drowning man. "Take me back, Lord of the Wind," I cried. "What am I doing among these dead estates? Take me back to the country where I was born, to the house where I am at home, to the things I used to handle, to the friends with whom I talked before man went mad. I am sick of this generation that cannot strive or fight. These people of one idea, this doleful, aging world, take me away." But the wind replied in angry tones, not gently as of old. "Is it thus you treat me, you whom I singled out from men? You have forgotten me for 15 years. You have wandered up and down a garden, oblivious of all things that I had taught you, incurious, idle, listless, effeminate. Now I have saved you from dying a mock death like a jester in a tragedy, and in time I will take you back, for that I promised, but first you shall be punished as you deserve." So saying, the wind raised me aloft and sent me beyond the wall. I dare not describe. I fear to remember the unutterable loathing of the 3 years I spent outside. The unhappy remnant of a middle-aged mankind was gradually exchanging lust for gluttony. Crowds squatted by day and by night round the houses of dainty foods that had been stocked by Harris the king. There was no youthful face to be found among them, and scarcely one that was not repulsively deformed with the sign of lust, cunning, and debauch. At evening there were incessant fires of crumbling buildings, and fat women made horrible attempts at revelry. There seemed to be no power of thought in these creatures. The civilization of ages had fallen from them like a worthless rag from off their backs. Europeans were as bestial as Hottentots, and the noblest thing they ever did was to fight. For sometimes a fierce desire of battle seized them, and then they tore each other passionately with teeth and nails. I cannot understand it even now. Surely there should have been some Puritans somewhere, or some philosophers waiting to die with dignity and honour. Was it that there was no work to do, or that there were no children to love, or that there was nothing young in the world, or that all beautiful souls perished in the garden? I think it must have been the terrible thought of approaching extinction that obsessed these distracted men, and perhaps they were not totally depraved. There was a rough fellowship among them, a desire to herd together, and for all that they fought so much, they fought in groups. They never troubled to look after the sick and the wounded, but what could they do? One day I began to feel that I was too one of them. I, who had held aloof in secret ways so long, joined the gruesome company in their mighty dance, and sat down to eat and drink their interminable meal. Suddenly a huge, wild, naked man appeared in front of the firelight, a prophet as it appeared, who prophesied not death but life. He flung out his mean arms and shouted at us, "In vain have you schemed and lingered and died, O last generation of the damned. For the cities shall be built again, and the mills shall grind anew, and the church bells shall ring, and the earth be reopened with new miseries in God's own time." I could not bear to hear this fellow speak. Here was one of the old sort of men, the men that talked evil, murmured about God. "Friends," I said, turning to the feasters, "we will have no skeletons like that at our feast." So saying, I seized a piece of flaming wood from the fire and rushed at the man. He struggled fiercely, but he had no weapon, and I beat him about the head till he fell, and death rattled in his throat, rattled with what seemed to be a most familiar sound. I stood aghast, then wiped the blood from the man's eyes and looked into them. "Who are you?" I exclaimed. "I have seen you before. I seem to know the sound of your voice and the colour of your eyes. Can you speak a word and tell us your story, most unhappy prophet, before you die?" Men of the last generation, said the dying man, raising himself on his elbow. Men of the last generation, I am Joshua Harris, your king. As brainless frogs who have no thought or sense in them, yet shrink when they are touched, and swim when the accustomed water laves their eager limbs, so did those poor creatures feel a nerve stir within them, and unconsciously obey the voice which had commanded them of old. And though the mere sound of his tremulous words conveyed an irresistible mandate, the whole group came shuffling nearer. All the while they preserved a silence that made me afraid, so reminiscent was it of that deadly hush that followed the proclamation, of the quiet army starting for London, and especially of that mysterious and sultry morning so many years ago, when the roses hung their enamelled heads and the leaves were still as leaves of tin or copper. They sat down in circles around the fire, maintaining an orderly disposition like a stray battalion of some defeated army, which is weary of fruitless journeys in foreign lands, but still remembers discipline and answers to command. Meanwhile, the dying man was gathering with a noiseless yet visible effort every shred of strength from his massive limbs, and preparing to give them his last message. As he looked around on that frightful crowd, great tears at his own pain and impending doom could never have drawn from him filled his strange eyes. Forgive me, he said at last, clearly enough for all to hear. If any of you still know what mercy is or the meaning of forgiveness, say a kind word to me. Loving you, relying on humanity and myself, despising the march of time and the power of heaven, I became a false redeemer and took upon my back the burden of all sin. But how was I to know, my people, I who am only a man, whither my plans for your redemption would lead? Have none of you a word to say? Is there no one here who remembers our fighting days? Where are the great lieutenants who stood at my side and cheered me with counsel? Where are Roberts and Baldwin and Andrew Spencer? Are there none of the old set left? He brushed the tears and blood from his eyes and gazed at the crowd. Pointing joyously to an old man who sat not far away, he called out, I know you, Andrew, from that great scar on your forehead. Come here, Andrew, and that quickly. The old man seemed neither to hear or understand him, but sat like all the rest, blinking and unresponsive. Andrew, he cried, you must know me. Think of Brougham and South Melton Street. Be an Englishman, Andrew. Come and shake hands. The man looked at him with staring, timid eyes, then shuddered all over, scrambled up from the ground, and ran away. It does not matter, murmured the king of the world. There are no men left. I have lived in the desert, and I saw that which I had seen long ago. Visions that come too late to warn me. For a time my plan has conquered, but the greater plan shall be victorious in the end. I was trying to staunch the wounds I had inflicted, and I hoped to comfort him, but he thrust me aside. I know that no man of this generation could have killed me. I have nothing in common with you, bright spirit. It was not you I loved, not for you I fought and struggled, but for these. I do not want to be reminded by that light of reason shining in your eyes of what we were all of us once. It was a heroic age when good and evil lived together in misery, we bound man to man. Yet I will not regret what I have done. I ask forgiveness not of God but of man, and I claim the gratitude of thousands who are unknown and unknown shall ever remain. For ages and ages God must reign over an empty kingdom, since I have brought to an end one great cycle of centuries. Tell me, stranger, was I not great in my day? He fell back, and the wind took his spirit, carried me also into space. The last men. The wind bore me onwards more than 40 years, and I found seated beside a granary 6 wrinkled and very aged men, whose faces were set with determination to go on living to the bitter end. They were delirious and naked. They tore their white beards, they mumbled and could not speak. The great beasts came out of the forest by night softly and gazed at them with their lantern eyes, but never did them harm. All day long they ate and slept or wandered a little aimlessly about. During that year 4 of them died. Afterwards, I saw the last two men. One of them was lying on the ground, gasping passionately for breath, his withered limbs awry with pain. I could see that he had been a magnificent man in his youth. As his old friend died, the last of the race, remembered his humanity. He bent down, kissed the livid lips carefully, and tearfully closed the filmed red eyes. He even tried to scratch a grave with his long fingernails, but soon despaired. He then went away, plodding as fast as he could hobble, weeping silently, afraid of the dead. In the afternoon he came to a vast city where many corpses lay, and about nightfall, when the stars were shining, he came to a massive half-ruined dome that had been used for the worship of some god. Entering, he tottered toward the altar which still stood, half buried in stone dust and flakes, and reaching up to a great bronze crucifix that stood upon it, with his dying strength he clasped to his arms the emblem of our sorrow. I saw the vast halls and palaces of men falling in slowly, decaying, crumbling, destroyed by nothing but the rains and the touch of time. And looking again, I saw wandering over and above the ruins, moving curiously about, myriads of brown, hairy, repulsive little apes. One of them was building a fire with sticks. That's the end then. I hope that the reading was interesting. I would potentially propose that if anyone else wants anything particular, that they could say something. Of course, I know I'm saying it to only a single person at the moment. I'm sorry, Oh, hey there. I thought you weren't going to be around the entire time. So, any opinions you might have beyond the sudden exclamation? Because I'm waiting a bit because I know you're on the phone and also at work, so, But yes. Well, I'm sorry about that. I probably wasn't the most ideal thing. Excuse me for a moment. I'm sorry. Now then, well, the issue that I've had is that I've not been able to get many people interested in actually reading it. I usually recommend it, but then no one really reads it, which is kind of disappointing, all things considered. I'm actually preparing to... It didn't take nearly as long as I thought it would. Less than an hour, actually. Oh, well, that's sort of a happens sort of thing. And for anyone else that joined us, we just actually finished reading the Last Generation by Flecker. I'm sorry about my voice at the end. There were just certain moments where it was impossible to sort of keep a neutral tone, as it were. So I'm going to... What I'm going to do now is I'm going to read more from The Mistaken Fury by Oswald Coldry. I'm going to just go through the contents here, and I'm going to... And there's much of a palate cleanser. I definitely would want to read something else of a similar nature, although sadly enough, things of a similar nature do not really exist. But, well, not many. There's Dr. Arnoldi, but that being in copyright, I would probably get... I probably wouldn't get slapped for that, but I still would rather not risk it. There's Leonid Andreev, and I was considering doing that. Let me think. Then. Either way, I would read something from this particular collection. I'm just going to change this for the moment. And I'm just going to open the book. And of course, if anyone has any requests or ideas, suggestions, what have you, okay, no, that's no problem. And I'm just going to blow my nose a bit. But yeah, I figure we might as well end things. Well, not end things necessarily, but sorry. Have something a bit less doleful, as it were. I'm trying to think here. I believe. Oh, yes, that's right. I could potentially go and read The Republic of the Southern Cross. Hyde, are you going to... so I suppose that you will just leave, you can go home and probably not have time to check in after that, which is a shame because if you could, I could definitely read something later. But, I'm not going to force you to do this, after all. Now, let me just think what I was going on. Oh, yes, I'm looking for something specifically that I read. But again, since I've read so many things, I do actually need to double check on the list here. Well, on the channel. Yes, that would be... The problem is, of course, I could read The Red Laugh by Andreev. That's a similar thing, but it would take some time. And then there's The Cross of Karl, which I hope to have been able to read, but the problem is it came out in, when was this? In 1931. So I'm not sure. So, yeah, it would basically, in 2 years' time, it would actually be relevant. Okay, that's not a problem. So, let me think. I could do Lazarus, indeed. That is a more common Andreev story, but... Okay, then I believe I can. This is a more well-known tale. I'm just going to try and find a particular, shall we say, the particular version of this that wouldn't take that long. This version seems to be 70 pages, which that's probably... That includes the foreword and a bunch of other things. There we go. There's 2 of them. Okay, that's why. Okay, this is about 11 pages in here. Okay. Okay, then. We will then proceed. But first of all, we will read another story from Oswald Coldray as a bit of a palate cleanser. Now then, let me just go through. We've already gone over... How long is Jabez Edwards? That's the vagabond here. 233. I believe we can do this one. The Strange Story of Jabez Edwards. Looking over my old sketches the other day, I came across a little watercolour done in the West Country many years ago, which reminded me vividly of one of the strangest passages of my life. I mean the passage associated with my intercourse with Jabez Edwards. It was a sunlit seascape, roughly enough executed, yet suggesting its origin to my own memory well enough. A great seaward slope of wood and sward breaking into roseate cliffs. These again running out into a low cape crowned with a cluster of towers and flinging a spray of golden rocks into the smooth, crisp sapphire sea. I remember the scene well, almost unreal in its dainty prettiness as it was. I painted it, as I said, some 10 years ago, many years after I had met and known Edwards, and when in fact that particular chapter of my life bade fair to be forgotten. Why it should have so vividly recalled his name to my remembrance, I will now proceed to narrate. I am an old man now, and the days I am going to speak of were those of the first enthusiasms of youth. I shall have to look for them far into the dark backward and abysm of time. Jabez and I were fellow clerks in a mercantile office in a big city of the Midlands. Charitable motives alone, if I remember rightly, first impelled me to cultivate his intimacy. I have always been attracted by odd personalities, but Jabez had little to recommend him, even in the way of singularity, except his extraordinary incapacity for any of the pursuits and interests of ordinary life. A great, gaunt, large-headed, clumsy lout of a fellow he was, inert, silent, associating with no one, always on the verge of dismissal by his employers for unpunctuality and general remissness. We understood that his people were very poor, and that he obtained his place and was in some way still overlooked by the influence of a distant relative. He joined in none of our pastimes. He joined in none of our pastimes and engaged in none by himself, as far as we could ascertain. He could not afford to go away for his holidays, as most of us managed to do. Instead, he moped in the dusty atmosphere of the city. His days seemed to be passed in a continual sad and sluggish and vague reverie. More from pity than any other motive, as I have said, I began occasionally to patronize him, walk the country with him, and soon attained by force of custom a certain degree of intimacy, though for a long time without eliciting more signs of personality than such as I have indicated. He was always very uncommunicative, generally seemed destitute, in fact, of any ideas to communicate. He scarcely roused himself at all from that joyless, motionless mood, too absolutely uninterested to be too absolutely uninterested to be positively gloomy or despondent, which seems stamped to perpetuity on his large, pallid, equine features and heavy, unchanging grey eyes. And yet, stupidly as he seemed to live, I found after a while some traces of quantities in Edwards which interested me. When he spoke of his affairs, as he occasionally did in a listless way, there was an attraction in the odd aloofness of his outlook. I began to suspect him to be devoid neither of intelligence nor of imagination. The impression he gave one, in fact, was one of possessing unknown potentialities in both directions, which some strange temperamental disinclination prevented him applying to any particular object. Through our long rambles he shewed little interest in country scenery, for which I was then, as always, a devout enthusiast. But I discovered in him a real feeling for the sky and all its forms and pageants, a peculiarity which I attributed to his city upbringing, allowing no other visitations of nature but such as descended from the wide and common firmament. He had a quaint affection, too, for ponds and pools and wide stretches of water. One evening, as we returned from the long iron structure that bridged the reservoir, where the water supply of the city was drawn, he confessed to me in one of his occasional confidences that he never passed the spot without a peculiar sensation of pure and calm exultation. He once said, looking up into the quiet turmoil of clouds that flooded an afternoon sky of midsummer, that such skies always seemed to contain patches of the days one had known long ago. I wondered what kind of days of long ago Edwards could look back to. Hints like these made this solitary and silent fellow little more to me perhaps than he was to the rest of our group. But such imaginations were very fitful and faint, scarcely emerging from the perpetual insensibility of his existence. Nor in judging Edwards at the time should I have given them the prominence which our later intercourse has led me to give them here. I had known him for a year when it occurred to me to invite Edwards to spend a fortnight with me at the house of some relatives on the east coast. He had never seen the sea before, and from the first it had the most singular influence upon him. He would watch its changing phases from the cliffs,
with the first real enthusiasm and absorption that I had ever seen him evince in any outward object. Lower down on the immediate margin, in that debatable land of cleansed rocks and clear grey pools and weeds, and curious and manifold life which the sea engenders, where all things undergo from year to year the eternal process of its pure ablution, here he would wander with a luxury of enjoyment which seemed incapable of satisfaction. To one who had known him in the commonplace drudgery of city life, there was something very strange too in the rapidity with which he learned the various crafts of the sea. He became deaf with the oar. In sailing, he seemed to have an instinctive sympathy with breezes and currents, which enabled him to acquire a subtlety of seamanship such as I have seldom seen surpassed. But he was most wonderful in the water itself. Though I am a very fair swimmer, he was better than I in the first week, and soon attained so consummate a command of the element that, though I have before since seen some of the finest swimmers of the time, I never saw one who seemed to me to possess such a perfect combination of ease and power of speed. But I could never persuade him to compete for a prize. He swam low with an indefinable undulation of his long body, such as a water rat uses, and which I always thought propelled him more surely than any stroke of arms or legs. Such a change in a man as came over Edwards with this visit surely was never before seen or since. In the next 3 years he spent many such fortnights with us, and I count them as some of the happiest spells of my life. He became a kind of interpreter for me of the sea's moods and the sea's law. He taught me invaluable tricks of seamanship, of swimming, of weather foresight, such as he never learned as far as I could see from anyone or anything beyond his own uncanny experience. We wandered on the sea face of the cliffs together, and he came to speak of the pomp of ocean sights with a subtlety and truth and power of fancy, with a cunning of expression born of accurate and profound receptivity, which affected me as the finest poetry has scarcely done. It was this faculty for which I prized his society most, and which seemed to me the most truly magical thing in the man as I knew him. I have heard since many examples of that strange gift for improvisation possessed by some of the peasantry of southern Europe. They have always brought Edward's manner of speech to my mind, but with him startling depth of insight took the place of their easy and superficial grace. And yet to shew that this was still the incapable Edwards of the city office, even in his best days he was beset by a certain ineffectiveness. His inspiration never came to order. Friends of literary pretensions to whom I introduced him found him as often as not silent and commonplace. He never could or never would converse, preserving always his sudden oracular way of saying his fine fancies and his exquisite epigrams, as it were, of natural observation. His expression, too, was often difficult, and at times he would lose the definition of his idea in a sudden mist of reverie. The phenomena of his mind were as shifting and unaccountable as they were often as splendid as those of the ocean that was his study. Again, for all the new press of life which now woke in him, he never developed any strong humanity or depth of personal feeling. Though we spent many weeks together during 3 long years, I do not think he was bound to me by any strong attachment. I attributed his reserve to pride, but I a natural incapacity. He clung to me as the only means whereby he obtained these occasional weeks of full-blooded vitality in his dreary years, but this almost anxious following of interest on his part, and strong curiosity and admiration on my part, the only ties which fastened our strange intimacy. They came to an end a little over 4 years after I had first. I ought to have said that our sojourns at the sea, so far from brightening Edward's long months of work in the city office, only added tenfold to the lifeless lassitude with which he underwent them. I could never understand how our employers overlooked so much laxity and seeming incapacity and unquality as Edwards evinced during those 3 years. But the end came at last, though not from them, for one morning he failed to appear, and the next, and then I had a short letter saying he had gone to a small fishing village on the Yorkshire coast, and obtained employment and a home among the people there, and begging me not to follow him. He was not sought for in the daily life, and indeed the daily business of the office missed very little. I visited him several times and tried in a half-hearted manner to persuade him to return, always getting to see him with difficulty and finding him reserved and glum and even uncivil. I heard that the people of the place considered him crazy, but that he obtained a footing amongst them on account of his extraordinary skill in the infinite book of secrecy of the seas and winds. Of this the simple fisherman always spoke with a kind of mystified awe. Then one day, when I went to the place after a longer interval than usual, I was told he had been some months missing and had left no trace by which his whereabouts could be guessed. I inquired in vain for him continually for the next few years, and then the thought of Jabez Edwards and his odd career gradually faded from my life. That was in the late 60s, and it was a good 16 years later that the strange thing happened that I am about to relate. I was staying with a friend in a large seaport down in the west. One morning I made up my mind to renew a certain former jaunt of mine, taking train and ferry for the little village of Hamill, and spending my day on the wild and beautiful promontory on the neck of which it stands. I took sandwiches and a bottle of claret in my sketchbook and reached Hamill in the middle of the forenoon, seeing with delight as fresh as ever the horizon. Just above the village I turned back towards the ferry which had brought me, and spent an hour making which just now led me to undertake this narrative. Then I ate lunch, packed my little load, and struck out, through some of the loveliest scenery in England, for Wave Point, my afternoon destination. The road runs through woods, and far below, beneath the sun-flecked stems, showed blue waves and rocks rainbow-hued in the sun. Then one emerges on the bare side of the promontory, where there opens out a mighty prospect of sea, variegated with 1,000 influences of tides and currents and breezes and mists and shadows, and so on to the wave point itself. The point is joined on the rest of the promontory only by a narrow causeway of rock which the storms and the spring tides ride right over. It stands far out to sea, cone-shaped, a solitary place haunted only by seabirds, hawks, hares, and rabbits, which shelter in the tangle of briars and gores, and one or two autochthonous goats. On its top a tiny ruin, the bare shell of an ancient chapel of St. Michael. Here I wandered for the most part of a summer day. I climbed the windy summit and listened to the voices of old Cornish legend and mystery that seemed to sting yet about the walls of that little desecrated shrine, with its dark interior serving now only as a stable for goats, and its prospect of distant sea framed in tall bare window perches. Underneath was a kind of stone-faced cavern or crypt, where in the near past an anchorite was said to have lived for several years, feeding on fish and such other wild life as his rugged home afforded, and conversing with none save by signal with vessels rounding the headland toward the open sea. As I wandered about the solitudes that summer afternoon, I seemed peculiarly able to sympathize with such a life of fellowship with the sea as the thought of that eremite suggested. High up in sight of that illimitable blue, lower among the crowding rocks, which the great seas clothed and unclothed again with sheets of dazzling foam, I seemed to realize, as he must have realized, the life of the sea as of some primeval personality, of a scale and power and beauty worthy of the worship of contemplation and service as he had given it. I thought much of the hermit, much too, as I could not do amid such association, as I could not but do amid such associations, of Jabez Edwards, who had first taught me these things. The thought indeed just crossed my mind whether these two names might not cover one and the same person, for the career of that hermit was so unfitting close to that of my old companion. The hermit disappeared, they say, he and his boat, some 4 years before this time, in a storm of midsummer. The fisher folk, in their superstition, hold that the devil took him. So might old Jabez have served his last years, till the sea was pleased in due course to take him to itself. That passing thought had often occurred to me since. At length the sun shone yellow from the west, turning every object in the landscape to its own colour but that inviolable blue. I prepared to consummate my day of ecstasy in the presence of the sea-gods, as it were, by one crowning rite, in a swim far out into the azure plain. There is a terror and a reverence of the sea that a man never knows till he has plunged in the element itself, and feels what small power of motion he has, independent of its mighty motions. Till he sees the land he has left loom high above his head, and the ring of rocks he put out from strange and inaccessible without, and the strange hindward aspect of the breakers. And all this I felt more clearly than ever before as I struck out with steadfast purpose into the open of the utter seas. I swam on strongly and rhythmically for a while, when I became aware of the presence of another person. Someone was moving leisurely to and fro about 100 yards in front. There was a fair breeze, and I caught sight of the figure, and lost it again at intervals as the waves rose and fell. I slackened, but travelled towards it by easy strokes, and I was surprised to see long black hair like a woman's. The next minute Jabez Edwards turned and looked at me with unrecognizing terror in his eyes, and then sped with an arrow-like impetus into the walls of waves. I knew him in spite of long ropes of hair and beard twisted with weed, and features weather-gnarled beyond description, and a frame and limbs more rugged and powerful, and even larger, I thought, than I had ever known them. The mid-sea is as hushed and solitary and overpowering as the midnight, and as apt for ghostly visitations. And at first a superstitious panic overcame me. I started helplessly at the dissolving veins of foam when he entered the wave-slop. Then strength returned to me, and I plunged ahead, calling his name, and so swam on, calling in a frenzy while twilight fell. I did not find him. Outcoming fishers found me and took me out, though that part of the day I do not remember. Was it his angel that I saw thus among the solitary waves, revisiting the haunts he loved? Or did he still, and does he still, tell out his uncouth human years in some inaccessible cavern under Channel cliffs? Think, reader, what you will. For myself, I like sometimes to think that neither was the case. I like to believe that in Jabez Edwards we knew the incarnation of some unnamed power of the sea, doomed for a penance to pass a certain span in dusty haunts of the human midland, and after penance taken again to his home. It is a strange and incredible story, the story of the old Greek Glaucus over again in our century of prose and of natural philosophy. But I am an old man, and a strong believer in those more things in heaven and earth than are dreamed of in your 20th century sciences. That being that particular story. So that's the fifth story we've read from The Mistaken Fury and Other Lapses. There's a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's a total of 13. So we're just barely under half. So there's this. Now then, I will drink something, and then I am considering if anyone has any suggestions or recommendations on what I could read. I am considering whether or not to read you some more work from either Andreev or perhaps Brusov. So those who actually are watching right now, and I see there's a few of you, I don't like to call out lurkers. I don't mind them being here, and I in fact like them being here. That's not the problem at all. I am just curious. I'm going to look into two potential stories that I could be reading on here. And I would, yeah. Oh, hey, you went through that. Okay, so have a good one then. Thank you, and sorry to see you go. I'm just going to very quickly go through this, and I'm going to check
could theoretically we could. Now there's the Republic of the Southern Cross by Valery Brusov we could be reading, or we could read through Leonid Andreev's Lazarus. The latter is the more well-known. That doesn't mean I don't want to actually give it a go. I'm just going to very quickly make a note. Yes, 1919. So it would be the 1919 translation. So yeah, if anyone has a preference, they can speak now, but if not, I can just launch into whichever one of these is shorter. So at first, anyway, I'm probably going to do both. Oh, we might as well. Okay, let us then go and arrange the page to be slightly. Okay, let me just arrange the. I normally do not arrange these for double, but I didn't exactly want to do it that way. It's for the arc. Sorry, I might have to actually look through this. I might actually have to look for it in a way where I want to actually be able to see that. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm fumbling with this a bit. I'm just going to put this in the chat. In fact, I've decided I'm going to read one of the shorter stories from Brusov first. But I'm going to look for a particular thing. There we go. This is the edition came out 19. Okay, fair enough. I'm looking for a particular edition. It is weird that you have both of these, but okay. Fair enough. Let's just see. I'm going to have to switch to a different bus. Okay, let's switch to this. This is a story by Valery Brusov. It is called The Marble Bust. The Marble Bust, a tramp's story. He had been tried for burglary and sentenced to a year's imprisonment. I was struck by the behavior of the old man in court and by the circumstances under which the crime had been committed. I obtained permission to visit the prisoner. At first he would have nothing to do with me and would not speak, but finally he told me the story of his life. You are right, said he. I have seen better days, and I haven't always been a miserable wanderer about the streets, nor always slept in night houses. I have a good education. I am an engineer. In my youth I had little money, and I lived a gay life. Every evening I went to a party or to a ball and ended up with a drinking bout. Yes, I remember that time well. Even trifling details I remember. And yet there is a gap in my recollections that I would give all the rest of my unworthy life to fill. Everything which has anything to do with Nina. She was called Nina, dear sir. Yes, Nina, I'm sure of that. Her husband was a minor official on the railway. They were poor, but how clever she was in making of the pitiful surroundings of her life. The pitiful surroundings of her life something elegant and, as it were, specially refined. She herself did the cooking, but her hands were, as it were, carefully wrought. Of the poor clothes she made a marvellous dream. Yes, and the whole everyday world on contact with her became fantastical. I myself, meeting her, became other than I was, better, and shook off as rain from my clothes all the sordidness of life.
May God forgive her sin in loving me. Everything around her was so coarse that you couldn't help falling in love with me, young and handsome as I was, and knowing so much poetry in my heart. But when I first made her acquaintance, and how, this I cannot now call to mind. Separate pictures draw themselves out from the darkness. See, we are at the theatre. She, happy, gay, this was so rare with her, is drinking in every word of the play, and she is smiling at me. I remember her smile. Afterwards we were together at some place or other. She bent her head down to me, and said, I know that you will not be my happiness for very long. Never mind, I shall have lived. I remember these words. But what happened directly afterwards, and whether it is really true that all this happened when I was with Nina, I don't know. Of course it was I who first gave her up. This seems to me so natural. All my companions acted in this way. They flirted with some married women and then after a while cast her off. I only acted as everybody else did, and it didn't even enter my mind that I was behaving badly. To steal money, not to pay one's debts, to turn informer, this was bad, but to cast off a woman who one has loved was only the way of the world. A brilliant future was before me, and I could not bind myself to a sort of romantic love. It was painful, very painful, but I gained this victory over myself, and I even saw a Bodvik in the resolution to overcome this plan. I heard that Nina went away afterwards with her husband to the south, and that soon after she died. But my memories of Nina were so tormenting that I avoided at that time all news of her. I tried to know nothing about her and to not think of her. I had not kept her portrait. I had returned her letters. Sorry. We had no mutual acquaintances, so little by little the image of Nina was erased from my soul. Do you understand? I gradually came to forget Nina, forget her entirely, her face, her name, and all her love. It came to be as if she had actually never existed at all in my life. There's something shameful for a man in this ability to forget. The years went by. I won't tell you now how I made a career. Without Nina, of course, I dreamed only of external success, of money. At one time, I had nearly obtained a complete success at which I aimed. I could spend thousands, could travel abroad, I married and had children. Afterwards, everything turned to loss. The works which I designed were unsuccessful. My wife died. Finding myself left with my children on my hands, I sent them away to relatives, and now, God forgive me, I don't even know if my little boys are alive. As you may guess, I drank and played cards. I started an agency. It did not succeed. It swallowed up my last money and energy. I tried to get straight by gambling and only just escaped being sent to prison. Yes, and not entirely without reason. My friends turned against me, and my downfall began. Little by little, I got to the point where you now see me. I, so to speak, dropped out of intellectual society and fell into the abyss. What place could I presume to take, badly dressed, almost always drunken? Of late years I have worked for months, when not drinking, as a labourer in various factories, and when I had a drinking bout, I would turn up in the thieves' market and doss houses. I passionately detested the people I met, and was always dreaming that suddenly my fate would change and I should be rich once more. I expected to receive some sort of non-existent inheritance or something of that kind, and I despised my companions because they had no such hope. Well, one day, all shivering with cold and hunger, I wander into someone's yard without knowing why, and something happens. Suddenly, the cook calls out to me, "Hello, my boy, you don't happen to be a locksmith, do you?" "Yes, I'm a locksmith," says I. They wanted someone to mend the lock of a writing table. I find myself in a luxurious study, gold all about and pictures. I begin to work and did what was wanted, and the lady gave me a rouble. I took the money, and all of a sudden I saw on a little white pedestal a marble bust. At first I felt faint. I don't know why. I stared at it and couldn't believe. Nina. I tell you, dear sir, I had quite forgotten Nina, and at this moment specially, for the first time I understood that I had forgotten her.
Suddenly her image swam before my eyes, and a whole universe of feelings, dreams, thoughts, buried in my soul as in some sort of Atlantis, woke, rose again, lived again. I took at the marble bust, all trembling, and I say, I look at the marble bust, all trembling, and I say, "Permit me to ask, lady, whose bust is that?" "Oh, that," she says, "is a very valuable thing. It was made 500 years ago, in the 16th century. She told me the name of the sculptor, but I didn't catch it. And she said that her husband had brought this bust from Italy, and that because of it, there had risen a whole diplomatic correspondence between the Italian and Russian cabinets." "But," says the lady to me, "you don't mean to say it pleases you? What an up-to-date taste you have! Don't you see that the ears, says she, are not in the right place, and the nose is irregular?" And she went away, and she went away. I rushed out as if I were suffocating. There was not a likeness, but an actual portrait. This was not a likeness, but an actual portrait. Nay, more, it was a sort of recreation of life in marble. Tell me, by what miracle could an artist in the 15th century make those same tiny ears set on awry, which I knew so well, those same eyes, just a tiny bit aslant, that irregular nose, and the high sloping forehead, out of which, unexpectedly, you got the most beautiful, the most captivating woman's face? By what miracle could there live two women so much alike only in the 15th century, one in the 15th century, the other in our own day? And that she whom the sculptor had modelled was absolutely the same and like to Nina not only in face but in character and in soul, I could not doubt. That day changed the whole of my life. I understood all the meanness of my behaviour in the past and all the depths of my fall. I understood Nina as an angel sent to me by destiny and not recognized by me. To bring back the past was impossible, but I began eagerly to gather together my remembrances of Nina as one might gather up the shattered bits of a precious vase. How few they were! Try as I would, I could get nothing whole. All were fragments, splinters, but how I rejoiced when I succeeded in making out in my soul something new. Thinking over these things and remembering, I would spend whole hours. People laughed at me, but I was happy. I was old. It was late for me to begin life anew, but I could still cleanse my soul from base thoughts, from malice towards my fellows, and from murmuring against my Creator. And in my remembrances of Nina, I found this cleansing. I wanted desperately to look once more at the statue. I wandered whole evenings near the house where it was, and I tried to see the marble bust, but it stood a long way from the windows. I spent whole nights in front of the house. I knew all the people who lived there. I knew all the people who lived there, but how the rooms were arranged, and I made friends with the servant. In the summer, in the summer, the lady went away into the country, and then I could no longer fight against my desire. I thought that if I could see the marble Nina once again, I should at once remember everything to the end, and that would be for me ultimate bliss. So I made up my mind to do that for which I had been sentenced. You know that I didn't succeed. They caught me in the hall, and at the trial it came out that I had been in the rooms of pretense of being a locksmith, and I'd often been near the house. I was a beggar. I'd forced the locks. However, the story is ended now, sir. But we'll make an appeal for you, I said. They will quit you. But why? Objected the old man. No one grieves over my sentence, and no one will go bail for me. And isn't it just the same what I shall think about Nina in a doss house or in prison? I didn't know what to answer, but the old man suddenly looked up at me with his strange and faded eyes and went on, "Only one thing worries me. What if Nina never existed, and it was merely my poor mind, weakened by alcohol, which invented the whole story of this love whilst I was looking at the little marble head?" Sorry for stumbling a bit at the end there. So that was the marble bust by Valery Brusov, and means that I could. Well, the type here is a bit small. Sorry. So there's that. So for anyone curious, yes, we have already read through the story that we want, the main story of today, i.e., The Last Generation by Flecker, and we've read through 2 stories since finishing that, as that actually was. Sorry, I just wanted to sniff an old book. I like the old book smell, as it were. I got in a notification. I'll just quickly look at it. Okay. I mean, I made 2 more stories, as I said, because that took less longer than previously anticipated. Now, I am considering that to do a similar stream tomorrow, specifically to already advertise that I'm going to read Andreas Lazarus, mostly because that is a rather famous story, and I feel that it could potentially be a bit more interesting to people rather than being a surprise thing done as a sort of a tail end of a completely different project. So, might probably do that. I would hope to try and make a proper video tomorrow at last. But yes, that's that. I suppose then I should, as I said previously, we have the links to the various to the 2 different fundraising pages that we have. Again, I definitely need to. I'm sorry that I still need to ask for help from people, but again, everything has been incredibly prolonged, as it were. Luckily, I do have intimations of this new job that basically I was called into. Actually, technically, earlier this week. It's just annoying that it didn't come a couple of months earlier. But with the economy being the way it is, it's not pleasant for anybody. As it were, I'm glad to have actually been able to read that. I was thinking that it would exhaust me too much to read through the entire thing. Now, there are other things I would like to read, but again, I can't really read The Cross of Carl because it's not in the public domain, I should think, as I made the inquiries about it. Then, although I will potentially give a bit of a gander to. I can actually double check to see whether or not it might be so in the US. Let's see. As I said. I'm just making a bit of a. Yes, okay. So it is 70 years in Europe, in general, after the author's death. So if I look into this, so Walter Owen died in 1953. So, yes, technically we actually could read The Cross of Carl. So, because it is in the public domain in Europe, in the European Union. So potentially I could do a thing where tomorrow I read you The Cross of Carl and Lazarus by Leonid Andreev, those being short enough to hopefully get through that after all. Let me see. I should. Sorry, I'm sorry. I did have it. Okay, here it is. So I'm just going to check it to see, because I have my own copy of it that I made years and years ago. 52 pages. Actually, with the title, yes, 52 pages. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and very quickly put in a, let's see when it's in 2. I'm going to just make a backup copy of it just in case, because I've had a bit of an issue finding it. So I'm going to just go here, and then here, and then here, and then here, and then just make a copy of it. So yes, sorry. So we in fact have the ability to read the Cross of Carl, as well as Lazarus, as well as the other Cross of Carl, Lazarus, and potentially the Republic of the Southern Cross by Brusov, which is a more of a catastrophic story of the apocalypse than this slight little fantastic little dainty that I just gave you as an example, because I remember it being short. So I actually might. Sorry, I'm just enamored with the old books now. So I'm thinking that tomorrow we do The Cross of Carl by Walter Owen, Lazarus by Leonid Andreev, and then hopefully The Republic of the Southern Cross by Valery Brusov, which are all things that I've talked about in the channel in the past, many of them many years ago, and videos where the recording quality was pretty terrible. I'm sorry about that. In the earliest videos, I didn't actually think to check my recording back after what I did. So there was a lot of stumbling and mumbling. And then when I did learn to check back, I just was doing the thing where I was just recording and just kept the entire recording in, not realizing that Audacity does a thing where, depending on your setup, it can take several seconds of complete silence after you start recording. Or in my current setup, it does a thing where it starts, but the first 10-ish seconds or so, the recorded sound is actually muffled, requiring basically waiting 10 seconds silently for every single take before it starts. So that's that. And of course, we also, if we have some time, we might read more of The Mistaken Fury and Other Lapses. We have already read 5 of the stories in here. So we can actually, so technically, we've read 4 in the last stream and 1 in this. So that's a bit of an interesting sort of an Easter egg thing. They're not advertised. They're just, I happen to read them when I can. So it might be a little interesting thing for people to hunt around to eventually find in these videos. Who knows? But yeah, I'm just trying to say this is what I'm intending to do tomorrow. I hope to do a regular video and then to do the reading stream a bit later. Who knows? But that's my current outlook, as it were. So I'm now just trying to wait out the clock a little bit, because I want this to pass the 2-hour mark. Because we did accomplish everything I set out to do today as far as the actual reading is concerned. Although, again, if somebody has some suggestion or recommendations, I could read that if you have anything. But if not, then we could end this for now and continue tomorrow with the 3 main titles as I outlined today. So that might be worth something or other. So yes, thank you very much for being here and for listening to my rambling. I hope that my occasional stutters and mistakes while reading weren't too distracting. Now then, let's just all very quietly wait for about a minute. Well, not very quietly, but let's just wait for a minute. Then I can stop blathering on. And yes, so to conclusion, please check the description for the links to the PayPal or the GoFundMe if you potentially can pitch in anything. Anything at all is currently appreciated. I need to get together stuff to be able to cover the rent. As you may know, I moved on Tuesday suddenly, so that was a bit of a sudden thing, and it wasn't very cheap at all, and it's not even cheap for the future. So I'm looking out for anything that can help me with this. And again, am willing and able to read anything the viewers might suggest, so as a sort of reward. And as a it's a reward for people being around, not even for anyone contributing or anything, just as a sort of reward for people bearing with me and with me meandering about these streams and just going off about myself. Luckily today I didn't say that much negative stuff about myself, and I didn't overshare to an insane degree. So you take your victories where you can. So yeah, I'm going to shut up now, and I'm just going to say thank you for watching, and see you tomorrow. And I hope to actually do that, and not do the thing where I say tomorrow and then I don't do the tomorrow because I'm suddenly extremely exhausted or tired. Well, and thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. And I'm sorry for that the background is not very fanciful or interesting. Just it is what it is.